Welcome to the Leading at the Next Level podcast with Dove Development and Consulting, the show built to provide ongoing support for your leadership journey. We're broadcasting live inside of our Leading at the Next Level community now, and we're specifically in the Leadership Legacy channel. And if you're hearing this on the podcast, just know that exists. That's where the live videos of these interviews moving forward are going to be. That's where you'll be able to access that and a whole host of other things through that community at no cost. It's a resource that we really want to have. So there's community to support your leadership journey. Now, today, I've got a wonderful opportunity. Jorge has become a dear friend to me and Cindy over the last several years that we've known them. And the cool part about this conversation is, while he's just outside of Winchester, Virginia, he runs a company that's based in California. Today, he's in Portugal and has been for several weeks. He and his family took a long holiday there and working there currently. And Jorge when we got to know him, he was the chief operating officer of a large printing company. Now he's the chief executive officer and president of another large printing company. And I'll say, before he talks about his background, he's been involved in every book that I've written in some way, but he's had a fingerprint on our lives that I don't know that I'll ever be able to thank him enough. Jorge, do you want to give some professional background and kind of introduce yourself, talk about the industry that you're a part of?
Yes, it was as always a great introduction, and I appreciate you for all the concepts about me and, of course, our friendship, which is more important than anything. So, I have been in the printing and publishing business for 38 years now. When I was preparing for this call, I'm like, okay, so how many years? And when I got to 38, I'm like, my God, I'm getting old. And I started in Mexico, so that's where the accent comes from. I always say that it's not from Indiana, it's actually from Mexico. And I worked there initially at a very small printing company where we had publishing and we have also printing and distribution of materials. And from there, I started to work for a very large printing company at the time, the largest printing company in the world, R. Donnelley. We moved to the States 25 years ago. And since then, I've continued to be in this market and in these wonderful worlds of print and distribution of printed materials. My family, my father specifically, was a publisher in Mexico. So I have been around books and I've printed product all my life. And that's where the love for books and the love for print comes. And I'm sure we'll get to touch on that in a few minutes.
Yes, indeed. Now, I mentioned earlier, Jorge, that you've had a fingerprint and been involved in each of the three books now. The newest one, The Values Advantage, we'll talk more about coming up soon, set for pre-order, starts soon. But the most specific thing that you did for me was talk me through the printing and publishing process when I said, gosh, Jorge, the company you work with, they own a big publishing firm. Should I do this? And should I do that? And you said, no, Wes, you're not ready for that. It wasn't what I wanted to hear, but it was what I needed to hear. And I'm forever grateful for everything that you've done to help me understand what I needed to do. And I'll talk more about one of the most recent things that you challenged me on and we've done. I'm excited that we're in the process. Now it's some more work ahead of me. But in my second book, Leading with Clear Purpose, you wrote the foreword. And I usually, when I have these conversations, I ask folks, what drove you to take leadership responsibility? You've already talked about that, but maybe give a quick synopsis of that, because your foreword just captured the essence of why it matters for leadership responsibility.
Yeah, we've talked before about leadership and the big paradigm. Are leaders born? Are leaders made? Is it a call? It is not, or is it not? And in my case, has always been the search for a bigger thing, right? What is that activity that is going to have the purpose, the why, right? Why do we wake up every day to go to work? It's not only to get paid, that's nice and it's needed, but it is, what are those things that drive you? And you and I have discussed before that in our case, in my case, is the fact that we as printers, as part of this wonderful business, we are stewards of the First Amendment. And later on, I'm sure we'll touch on that, how important it is now more than ever to make sure that freedom of speech, that First Amendment is alive and kicking. And many of us have a very important part of it. And as a printer and distributor of printed materials and of books specifically, we are part of that supply chain. A little further, I will tell you that when I took this new role at PR 2 years ago, it was basically because the team believed that. right? So they believe that we were an important part, in our case, of the education supply chain, but also because I was surrounded by professionals that were aligned with my thinking and also that understood customer satisfaction and understood the meaning of being part of that first amendment stewardship. So I think that's in summary what we've been talking about on the past experiences with you.
Yes, indeed. Now, with your background serving as that foundation, we've talked about your purpose. You've mentioned BR printers. And from me to you, Cindy and I have absolutely loved our interaction, not just with you, but your team. And what you said was it's truly an organization. They exceed expectations and they deliver value. Holy moly, it was wonderful. And we look forward to more of that. Talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned education, but who do you guys serve? What's the industry, the folks that you really key in on? How do you deliver that value?
So education is number one, K to 12, higher ed, and professional. So think about the textbooks that go into school districts across the US. We are blessed with some of the largest education publishers in the US being part of our customer base. We're also big on children's books. So these are a lot of the titles that you're familiar with, and as a grandfather and as a father, but also some of the titles that have been under fire the past few years. We are agnostic as to the content. We believe that it's anyone's right to write a book and to distribute it. And supply and demand dictates if the book sells or not. And so children's is another big part of our business, and trade, which is basically what we do for you, what we do for other big publishers, novels, fiction, nonfiction, that kind of thing. We're also big on promotional materials, right? So where we help people to go out and promote their brand with very specific promotional materials. And also we do distribution of that type of materials and also of books. So that's it. A lot of things we do, but books is our big passion.
So last year, as part of the partnership that we had for the 2025 Leadership Legacy Experience, your team helped us provide a book and a killer 8.5 by 11 workbook. And the quality, Jorge, was second to none. It was phenomenal. But more importantly, customer service was second to none. And the other part, you mentioned the materials, the assets and so on. You might, if you're in the community and you're seeing over top of my head, you see a couple of the different event credentials hanging from my baseball bats. Some of those are produced by Casa del Mar. And I'll say specifically, I'm going to mention two names, and please forgive me for not mentioning everyone because everybody on the team was amazing. But Mary Herrera and Hona were absolutely wonderful. Holy moly, they were great, Jorge. I appreciate your team very much. So quality, the service, everything was phenomenal. Now,
Superstars.
one of the things Cindy and I get out of bed for in the mornings is how do we help people know good people? And we've had a few chances, not as many as we'd like, but there will be more to introduce folks to Mary specifically and the team because it's a high level of service. Not many folks exceed expectations, and they 100% did. Okay. You, for the new book, The Values Advantage, you contributed, you're in the second part of the closing chapter on real world examples. And you talked about how your values, which spell CASCADE, how they make an impact. Now, you'd be willing to talk about just one of those and how you work to model it every day for your team and the clients in the community that you serve.
Yes. So Cascade it's an acronym, of course, and it comes from customer centric, adaptable, solutions innovators, collaboration, alignment, data driven problem solvers, and experienced integrity. So that's what our core values are. The one that you just talked about, it, so I'm going to hang on that, is customer centric. Right? There is a reason why it's number one. As a CEO, people say, a job, how this happens. I've always said the most important job I have is to keep everyone safe in our plants. It's our employees. But of course, once you start talking commercially, customers are the core of our company. And being customer centric is to respond to them, to their goals, help turn their ambitions, their dreams, in the case of writers like you, into reality. That's what customer-centric means for us. And in the write-up that I did for your book, I mentioned several examples of this. One that comes to mind is a children's publisher, very big children's publisher, that had an opportunity to go into other type of markets, another type of inventory strategies to reduce costs. One big problem that publishers have is that they don't know how many books they want to print, because they don't know if they have in their hands the next Dan Brown, or the next Maxwell, or if it's a dot. So how many books am I going to print? So there is a lot of obsolescence in the publishing side. So we help this specific publisher to identify what titles they can print in smaller quantities and how the price point was going to be good enough for them to continue to make the profit they need to make for their shareholders. And it took us about 6 months to get to the sweet spot. But once we did, it's been a great success. But it was all about a mix between being customer centric. And of course, we have stakeholders that we have to serve and that we have satisfied. So that is always a good experience to have, to try to mold them together. But we did for this specific customer.
Jorge, you started that response with something that is very near and dear to my heart. You talked about the safety of your team. There's a friend of ours, his name is Jeff Henderson. In his book, Know What You're For, he said that when your employees feel cared for, they care for our customers.
Mm-hmm.
And so true. I was in safety for about 15 years. I remember the hardest thing that I ever had to do was make a phone call when there was a workplace fatality to that person's family member. And that's where safety, the rubber really meets the road. And where I'm going with that is every individual that's part of BR Printers that we've spoken with understands that you care for them as an individual. That's your first customer. And that's not words you're saying. That's what we've heard from them. And that's well done, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And let me compliment on that. Our industry is not super dangerous because there is a lot of systems and a lot of tools that the industry has and the machines have to make sure that we don't have a bunch of widow makers everywhere. But human nature is very special, and we do things that we shouldn't do for reasons that we don't know why. You're correct. The most important thing is that people understand that when they come to work for us, they come in with 10 fingers, 10 toes, and they're going to leave the company with 10 fingers, 10 toes. Part two of that, and this is something that my team has heard me saying a million times, is that the company we run needs to be the company that if my daughter or my son or my grandson comes and works for us, I can stand on the door and say, she are going to be safe and people care about that. That has been the mantra since I started in manufacturing many years ago. That was placed on me by great mentors, and I'm now executing on at the leadership level.
Oh, you mentioned the mentors, and I'll say this briefly, and we'll keep moving with the topic at hand. The book that I just finished the manuscript for, where I'll be soliciting some input from you on publishers and those relationships and so on, is about, I'm a hillbilly. My accent's not from Indiana either. It's from the hills of Virginia, West Virginia. But I've had some wonderful people in my life, and I reference our relationship in that book too. I've learned from some wonderful people. Jorge, I carry it as a tremendously heavy obligation that I've got to pay it forward. That it has had opportunities that I didn't deserve, and I need to make sure that I pass it on to anybody that will hold still and listen. And some people who won't hold still. You've touched on it, but I want to frame this next question. In many cases, I ask folks, hey, how do you make sure you align your individual values with the values of the organization? But you and I've talked about that. When you went to work, when you took the chief executive officer and president position with BR, that was a big part of what you were looking at. How have you been able to do that with your organizational values and your personal values?
Yeah, it all starts, frankly speaking, when you start interviewing with the senior leadership of the company. And I am blessed that there was an immediate click between me and the chairman of the board of directors, the ownership of the company, in the way they treated people, the way they treated their customers, the way they see the business. So that was part number one. Part number two, interesting story is that when I was interviewing for the job, I was invited to go and visit one of their facilities in Ohio and Kentucky, a couple of facilities there. And the tour was conducted by a gentleman, Steve Krill, that now runs our fulfillment operation. And I remember he was so laser focused on telling me how they managed the customer service experience. And without getting into a lot of details, but it had to do with a team effort using a team email that was basically open, right, between our folks in the West Coast and our folks East Coast from 6 a.m. in the morning to 9 p.m. at night every day. And how they have achieved a level of customer service and satisfaction using that model. So when I heard that, I'm like, okay, we're talking the same language here, right? We have the same ideas. And then I got to meet the gentleman who's our COO now, David Gall, extraordinary professional, engineer by trade, one of the most intelligent people you will ever meet and I have ever met. And our conversation was all about data. It was data driven, which is one of our core values. Data driven. It was like, this is how many books we're producing. This is how many books we can produce. This is our downtime, et cetera, et cetera. So and those are just two things, right? The third is when I got to really meet the ownership of the company, I realized that I was talking to people that believed in the safety mantra that I just spoke, meaning profits are nice. They're very nice. But without people and without customers, there are no profits. And then there are some other things about social responsibility that I discussed with the ownership at the time, and I continue to do every day. And that's when I said, you know what? This is the right company for me.
I'll speak from personal experience. About 9 months prior to our interaction with your team at BR, we dealt with another company for a small run. We're small fish in a very big pond, but we had a small run, and the customer service experience was not the same. And the reality was they viewed us as you're small, and we are, but we're going to grow. And that we're still small was BR, but it didn't feel like we were small. It felt like we mattered. And that was so wonderful to see. Now, Jorge, the next question I'll pose for you is you've talked about it with how the customers experience. I'm going to do this a little bit different. Talk to me about how you've been able to really sew into the employees and the overall experience and how you've seen that in the 2 years you've been there, how you've seen that impact their daily lives.
For starters, as soon as we started here, we made sure that the communication with the employees, with our colleagues, was much more constant and more open. We made a distinct effort to have a newsletter translated from English to Spanish because we have a big Hispanic population in our plants. Personally, I am very visible in the plants. I like to do that. I like to be in front of folks. I like to listen. And I think leadership is about listening. There is a big difference between hearing and listening. Hearing, you can hear noises, you can hear music. Human beings listen to each other. And the most important thing, and this is a cliche, but I'll say it anyway, is that it doesn't matter if I'm the CEO or I'm the janitor. If you're having a conversation, you have to make an effort that the other person feels that he or she is the only person that exists at that moment in time talking to you. So that was also that's a big change we have made. We have provided at the supervisor, manager, director level another data. As I said, that we're a data-driven company. And the other part is that we have created a lot of solutions based on the feedback from the folks that work for us. It's very exciting when you see it. And there was an example on the book that I'm not going to steal all my thunder from the book, but there was another example from the book where we said a customer needs this, whatever it was. And we basically created not a committee. My God, we just put 5, 6 people on a call and we said, let's fix this. Let's do it. And in the book, your readers will read what I'm talking about. It was a very exciting project between the East Coast and the West Coast. So I think when folks feel that their opinion matters and that their opinions and their activities create a dynamic of growth, suddenly smiles start to come more often than not. And I think that's also been part of our success in the last 2 years.
It 100% is. And I sent you a text message about this a while back, but I've not gotten to speak with you in person since. There's a mutual friend that we have at this point that I've built the friendship through what I'll touch on in the next question, but his name's Jerry. And what I was most impressed with is he learned by example. When we toured his facility a couple of years ago, he called everybody by name. He was very invested in the personal relationship. He knew the technical background. He was wonderfully experienced at that, but that doesn't always translate into the personal relationships. And more importantly, the personal respect that I saw him show people as
Indeed.
the plant director. His words to me were, I don't know that Jorge understands how much he's impacted my life. And it's one thing for you to say that here. It's a whole different thing when we're hearing people that we know have truly had that impact. What you're saying here. So thanks for being who you are, brother.
That's great.
We talk about the core values and you've talked about those, and I've watched you invest in your people to develop not just their technical expertise, but their leadership growth and their development. How have you rested on your own core values to really ensure that you're always working to grow and be the best version of you that you can be so you can lead them effectively?
Yeah, to be absolutely transparent, when we started this journey at VR Printers, the core values were totally different to what they are right now. One of the things we did last year, at the beginning of last year, was say, okay, we need to reset those core values to what I believe are our guiding light for the future. And we sat down, and my executive team, myself, it was 2 or 3 sessions, very, very intense. And we all talked during those sessions about our own experiences and how our own experiences have made who we are. In my case, I think collaboration was a strong one. I come from, as I said, a family of publishers, but also I worked for 28 years with a very large company who was grounded on collaboration. So for me, collaboration has been something that I have really, really tried to mold into VR. And that's why it's one of our core values. And then the part about being solution innovators. Right? The printing business sounds sometimes dry as the ink we print on the paper, but it's a business that has been evolving a lot. And it's a business also that, because we're part of a large supply chain, you need to see it as not only a part of that supply chain, but how do you take portions of that supply chain? Innovation, that's where innovation comes into the picture. When I started in this business 30 years ago, I mean, there were no digital presses that can produce one book with beautiful quality. That was like a big, what are you talking about, right? Now we're producing books on digital presses. We can produce 5,000. They are the same with a very similar price point. So innovation, I think, is the other one that really has been part of my life and that I have tried to really push into the way we do business here.
We've loved watching it through the relationship, through the experience we've had. Now, we've touched on this a couple different times. You've contributed to the Values Advantage in that chapter. You also be an executive panelist. Again, thank you for being willing to always. Yeah. I don't know that you've ever told me no. So I'll keep asking.
Let's keep going. Bye.
You'll be an executive panelist at the 2026 Leadership Legacy Experience. And the whole goal is, how do we give folks tools to really apply the Values Advantage, to take advantage of what you talked about there with really embedding those core values into the organization? What can you share about what organizations and leaders should expect when they take the time to make sure they've got strong values and they're embedded at every level of their organization?
Yeah. First of all, take the time to understand what is that you want to do. What is the final outcome? What is that light at the end of the tunnel? What does it mean to you? It has to be related to the passion of doing things, the why. It absolutely needs to be related to the why. And then sit with your team. And if you're part of a team and your leadership is asking you to be part of the creation of core values, my God, take the time to do it. Spend as much time as you need to think about it and be open to other opinions. I will tell you, when we were doing our new core values, we had a couple of long sessions, and they didn't get nasty because that's not the objective, but there were dissension. And as a leader, and this is I think the core of my response to you, as a leader, you need to accept that you are not the Pope and you don't have absolute truth. And you have to be open to receive feedback and people telling you, listen, that's great, but there is this other option. So that's another part of it. The last part I would say, I read it on your social media posts and it's part of the book too. When you create core values, when you create these values that you're going to live by, please don't make it so they sound cool. There is absolutely nothing to gain for values that sound cool, that you are. The corporate speech, I think, is one of the worst things that can happen in any business. When people come to me and they start talking in riddles, and there are 2 or 3 words that sound really cool, that you might have an MBA or you might have a high school education, but my God, I'm going to tell you that my bandwidth is limited as we look for the paradigms. What? Why don't you tell me I don't have time to do this because I don't believe in this crap? So make sure that your values are not a nice poster, that they are not something that you created to feel good or to feel important or to feel that you feel more intelligent than the rest. They have to be real, because if not, people will know they are not real. People will quickly know, hey, this is more corporate jargon.
Yep.
Who cares? And I will say this very quickly. When we were creating our goals, our fantastic CHR, Mariella Gerst, she put together a bunch of quotes from different leaders in the world, and also the mission from certain companies. And I distinctly remember the one from Tesla, which was to build great cars. Period. Amazon, to serve all customers. Period. So come on. And these are the biggest companies in the world, right? So just take that as part of why we need to be more real when we do these things.
Jorge, Cindy and I have a vision through this idea of the values advantage that within the next year that we've got a program that launches that we can help companies from the janitor to the CEO be able to define in behavioral terms. So here's exactly how I live this value, this value, this value daily. And if I do this, this is how it's not aligned with our value. So they've got that level of clarity. And the reason why is about a year and a half ago, we were with a wonderful team. It was about 20 supervisors in a manufacturing, and I'll tell you who it was later, but it was a great company. We knew many of the folks. That the average seniority was 20 years in that room. And we asked, the very opening slide that we covered with them was, what's your core values? And we were talking about the importance of values in that just our emerging leader development course that we've done with many folks that you've had on your teams over the years. And Jorge, no one of the 20 could tell me what their core values were. They talked about safety. They talked about quality, all of which were important, but they weren't their values.
Right.
Nobody.
Big difference. Big
And
difference.
the problem was those values were written, they were painted on the wall in the room. And they still couldn't tell me what the values were. And it wasn't their fault. That's a leadership responsibility.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. And no one can say that they are batting 100 or 1,000 on this. And I'm not saying that we are, but we are very specific with each of the plant managers to make sure that there is a constant reminder. Hey, this is here. This is what it means. And in our newsletter, we do the same thing. We try to connect the dots, right? Hey, we want this contract. We want this contract because we were customer centric, because we were data driven, because there is alignment between us, because we provided a solution, an innovation, and because we have experience. Suddenly you start connecting the dots, and that's another part of this journey which is not simple, by the way. And it moves along if you're believing it.
And your word is constant. We can't stop. The last formal question I'll ask you here is, and I do this every time I get to talk with somebody that's leader. So if I'm young and I'm hearing this and I want to really lead people, I want to earn influence, not just be a supervisor or manager and title only, what advice are you going to give me?
Be real. It's very simple. Be yourself. If you don't like yourself, then change yourself. I always said this, and this is something that even my kids get tired of me saying this. But when my father was teaching me my father is my number one teacher of everything. He passed 10 years ago, but he always told me, he says, listen, when I die, the only two things you're going to get from me are my last name, and you better take care of it, and a college education. And I remember asking him, I said, okay, your last name, that's great, but tell me more about it. He says, it's very simple. It's all about integrity. It's all about who you are. It's all about how you develop yourself, how you show yourself. So the same thing applies here, right? As a leader, you need to be credible, but you're credible because you are another human. As I said this at the beginning of the call, we're all the same, right? My father-in-law, who also passed many years ago, he was in the hotel business. And he used to say, everyone cooks with water. There are some other ways to say this in other ways, and not for this podcast, but we're all the same, right? So if you present yourself, and this is for the young folks that are going to listen to this, you need to present yourself the same way you present to your kids. And I'm not suggesting that you are the parent and your employees are the kids by any stretch of the imagination. I'm saying the real you needs to show at home, and the real you needs to show at work. And guess what? People will follow. And assuming that you have a good business and a good set of core values and good objectives and a good product, of course, that would be my best. And also look at the long game. And that's another topic for another day, that some generations want to have immediate impact in everything they do. That's great. But you have to play the long game. It will pay out.
There's a book that the companies you've worked with have probably printed millions of copies where it says, as you sow, so shall you reap. Doesn't say when, doesn't say where, but it says you will. That's the long game.
Indeed.
Jorge, I deeply appreciate your friendship, but just as importantly for now, your time and being willing to do this. In the show notes, wherever someone's accessing this, I've got the link to BR Printers. And I'll say, whether it's assets for events, the printed books, whatever, or even the shirts, the assets for a big corporate event, Hill or customer service. Wow, it's been great. I've got BR Printers LinkedIn link in the show notes, and I've got your personal LinkedIn in the show notes. No, I'm not encouraging people to spam Jorge and chase him down, but I'm saying he's been a blessing in our lives, for me and Cindy. And my guess is he will be for you if you learn to know him and develop that relationship. I'll also, wherever we've got this in show notes, I've also put a link to the Values Advantage, because I'm extremely excited about what that will turn into over time. And because we've seen it really make a difference in a lot of organizations. So this Leading at the Next Level podcast has changed rapidly. And I'm going to say pretty significantly. We used to say, here's what you do for a trial. Here's what I'll say is, if you have a need for continuing education credit, you've tuned in to catch this, the audio version, the video version, whatever, send me an email at admin@dove-development.net, and I'll connect you with something to fulfill that need for continuing education credit. We've changed a lot of things, so it's not as simple as saying, here's what it's going to be, because I don't remember what it is, right? But we'll take care of it. Jorge, thank you very much for the time. I appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.